And when we are talking about design, bringing your requirements to the paper is what we do with blueprints. Your blueprint must meet the requirements. And on stage three, we said, how do we deploy, implement, or put things into action? Once everything is built, then you're going to do the testing, then you're going to do the validation, and then you're going to deliver. This is where you also do knowledge transfer sessions for your customer. So this was a simple four-stage design, a framework which you would implement in real time when you are trying to build anything, such as a home, right? So what is Microsoft offering? So when we talk about Microsoft, we said, hey, we have these four stages too. Stage one is your assessment, where you're going to define your strategy, understand the business motivations, provide justifications, understand how you want to prioritize this project. Stage two is where you're going to start building your blueprints. This is where we are talking about enabling your digital estate, initial organization alignment, skills readiness plans, and cloud adoption plans. Ready stage is where we have talked about Azure setup guide, landing zone. If you remember, we did talk about landing zone yesterday. Landing zones are something which allows you to group your subscriptions and go with infrastructure as a code deployments. So if you remember, I gave you a KV article yesterday for landing zone where there was a button which says deploy to Azure. What will it do? It will deploy pre-configured environment for your enterprise. So the pre-configured environment isolates security from management from your workloads. So everybody has its own subscription aligned. And then adopt stage is where we are talking about migrating and innovating. Of all these three stages, we have to manage governance and we have to make business commitments. Make sure that we end this project, or if it's the migration project, we deliver at the right time. So this is what we have discussed. More details about the cloud adoption framework. This is the KB article. I've shared the whiteboard yesterday with everybody. I hope you guys have downloaded it. Just give me a thumbs up if you have downloaded it successfully. Anybody who has not been able to download it, let me know. I can share those links one more time, or if you have access to the chat for day one, you can find it there as well. Anybody who has not been able to download this whiteboard and the design document from yesterday? I take the silence as no. So we have 14 people. Yesterday we had 23. So I'm hoping others would join us. So we started with governance. What is governance? Governance has always been about implementing business standards. Governance has always been about, what do you call it? Having some kind of control on the resources that you have deployed. Governance is a set of rules which defines compliance. So this is what we have done. In simple terms, governance in Azure has always been about policy plus RBAC plus tags. So this is what we have. So this is where we have talked about what is an RBAC, what is a policy. Then when would you implement governance? In a simple organization where you have multiple teams, multiple subscriptions, where you want to manage some kind of regulatory compliance, you must go with governance. Now, where will I apply this governance? This is where we have talked about 4 levels of hierarchy. So we have management groups, subscriptions, resource groups, and the resources. Management groups, a logical container to host multiple subscriptions. Subscription, billing purpose, a logical boundary for your resources. Resource group, a logical container to host your resources that share common life cycle. Resource itself, it can be any service that you consume in Azure. Now, management groups are here to help you mimic your organization structure. So that's what we have learned. As an example, I've compared it with Active Directory domain services structure, right? In Active Directory, you have domain, subdomain, then you have your organization units, then you have your security groups, then you have your objects. So this is the tree structure which we have in ADDS, right? So you can mimic that structure in Azure Active Directory using management groups. We did talk about facts like most of us were having 2 to 3. The max inheritance level or level of depth, as to say, is 6 that we support with management groups. Then we have talked about resource groups. Resource groups are logical folders to host your resources. Hey, resource groups are the ones which keep all the resources that belong to a project or that belong to a particular type of resource or that belong to an application together. Whoever shares a common life cycle. That's what we want to keep it. Example, if you see the box, I've told you that a simple banking application can have a firewall, load balancer, front-end, middleware, back-end, network, and security components integrated. So I can bring all of this into a single resource group. On the right-hand side, we're also talking about how you can bring the inheritance with your management groups. So Microsoft is an MNC that has offices in Americas, APAC, and EMEA, right? And this is where we have talked about within Americas, I have multiple different business units. Within that, I have multiple different departments. Within that, I'll have my subscriptions. So you decide how many levels of management interfaces do you need. So 6 levels is max that you can go with. Then we have talked about shared subscription versus dedicated subscription model. Yesterday, if you remember, this was a diagram which I've shown you and asked you this question: is this a shared model or is it a dedicated model? Both answers are right because of this rectangle box that you see here. Those are the subscriptions which are shared. But whereas every department has its own dedicated subscription as well. Okay. Then we have talked about subscription itself. Subscription is primarily known for billing. Subscription defines what resources are being consumed by you. Subscription allows you to govern access to the resources or the services that you are deployed. If I were to be an enterprise, these are the 5 steps which I do, which we have discussed yesterday. And then we did talk about Learning Zone. This is where I've asked you to go to this particular website to learn more about it. And then we did talk about something called subscription types. So this is where we have talked about free one. So which we started the day with. If you are somebody new, what will you get is a tenant and a subscription. That's your free one with a $200 credit for 30 days. Then you go with pay as you go. The moment 1 year is over, your free subscription changes to pay as you go model, where you're being charged monthly. Then I've told you about SIs, partners of Microsoft like Infosys, HCL, Accenture, all those companies who are out there, Atos, right? So these companies can help you design, deploy, and manage your environment for you, okay? Then we have enterprise agreements, which are upfront monetary commitments with Microsoft, where you're reserving your resources for a given period of time by making the payment upfront so that you get enough discount. And then student subscription is where you get a $100 credit per 12 months rather than 30 days. Can I have multiple subscriptions? Yes. When you have different departments, when you have different environments, when you want isolation. For example, in a large enterprise environment, when we talk about hub and spoke architecture. So let me just give you a simple example here. I'll just go back here, type hub and spoke, Azure. And then the first link is a hub and spoke architecture link. So if you look into this diagram, hub is basically the transit point where all the shared resources are kept, which means a subscription, which is at the organization level, can be considered for hub. And then each rectangle box, each blue dotted rectangle box that you see on the right is a spoke, which can represent a department. And if you can see, these departments are not interconnected, which means no communication between them is allowed by default, right? Any communication with the internet has to go via the hub. So in this scenario, a hub and spoke architecture, hub is a shared subscription, a spoke is a dedicated subscription. Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me so far. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks, Asro. Thanks, Roshan. Thank you, others. Let's get going. And then we did talk about tags. Tags are like stickers, like when you walk into any. So what type of subscription is this? Okay, enterprise agreement most of the time. So the best person to answer this question would be you. So what I want you guys to do is, if you have access to your environment, you just go here. Total.azure.com. Yes, definitely. Most of the large enterprise customers who deploy hub and spoke architecture, they go with, yes, that's what I'm saying, Vijay. Most of the customers who go with multiple department isolation, each department will have its own subscription, and each subscription can be an enterprise agreement, because we did discuss that there are different types of subscriptions. Again, it also depends on the workload type. So let me also give you the page which I would have bookmarked. Microsoft. Okay, not this one. The reason why it doesn't show up is because it's not Chrome. So let me just give you here of details. Yeah, this one. So these are different subscription types. What we saw was only from a design perspective of Azure. But if you're a developer, you get a subscription from Visual Studio Enterprise as well, right? So this one here, depending upon your need, you will select which type of subscription best fits your need. But to simply answer your question, if it's hub and spoke architecture, hub and spokes are enterprise agreement subscription types that we implement. Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me so far. So I said, if you want to figure out what kind of subscription you have, all you have to do is go to the portal, search with the keyword subscriptions, and then get started. See here, I have this subscription and I can click on that subscription. It clearly tells you what type of plan it is. So on the right hand side, you see. For me, it says Azure plan because it has been given to me by Microsoft, because I'm a Microsoft employee teaching Azure, right? So all details about that plan and cost and then the forecast, all that is available to you here. Okay? So this is a place that you should go to. So now let me close all this. And then we talked about tags to be business aligned or IT aligned. This is where we have talked about aspects like functional, classification, accounting, partnership, and purpose. Purpose is for business, functional is for IT. A few examples for the same are available. More details about that article comes from this KB. Then we have talked about resource Azure policy. We did this practically yesterday. Azure policy is a three-step thing, right? The first thing what we did was we created a policy definition. The second thing what we did was we assigned the policy to a given scope. The scope that we set yesterday was the whole tenant itself, and then which means the root management group. And then third step is to go and check the compliance. If you remember, we did receive the validation check errors because the policy is still in action. If I go back here, I don't know if I've created it within this domain. I think it was in Fidelity. So let me go back, switch to my personal account. And we said any resources must be deployed only in East US region. The moment you go west, you will receive the validation error saying that, hey, because of this policy, we won't be able to allow you to deploy this particular resource. So the first step is go to policy here, check if that policy is in action. So how do I check that? Go back to definitions here, see if your definition is listed. I'm sorry. From the definitions, you can see the list, but assignments is the page where it will show you whether the policy is in action or not. So let me just show you that custom policy definition that we created yesterday, which was with regards to the location pair. Okay, see here, I love locations 51673, that's still available. If you go to assignments, you will see that this policy is assigned to the tenant root group, which means at the top level. And if I go back to home now, and if I try to create a virtual machine, see here, just a virtual machine, just as an example, I'll go with the defaults, everything default, except the location. So if I say Azure virtual machine, let's just give it a name, select the subscription, select the resource group, test VM01, going with the defaults, and then the location rather than East US, I'll just select West US. The review and create, it should fail. It create button would not be highlighted to us. Let's see that. Here, validation failed. Click here to view details. The non-compliance message which we created was you're not compliant. The simplest reason why we are not compliant by the policy, you are getting that error. Let's just go back to networking here. It says networking missing fields. Okay, now the fields are updated. So now there should not be any error. The validation should succeed, which means the create button will be highlighted. See here, the validation is passed. So this is what we have tested yesterday. So policy has always been about enforcing business standards to govern your access and then to manage compliance in your environment, right? Yesterday, if you remember from the case study, we did talk about a situation wherein we said, hey, we need to limit the size of a virtual machine so that we can control the cost associated to deploying the virtual machines. So that's something which we have discussed. So that's about your Azure policy. How do we check compliance? So go back to the policy page, home, excuse me. Go back to the policy page and then go to the section compliance. If you remember, the policy name would be highlighted. So I'm clicking on it. And it clearly shows me that there are two resources which are non-compliant. And it clearly tells the reason also. Hey, you are non-compliant because of the location. As per the new policy that we have associated, we need to make sure all these resources are in East-West region. A simplest example that we have discussed was GDPR. I gave an example of Australian country, how the government in Australia enforces that the data associated with their citizens never leaves their country, right? So that's something which we can think of. Then we have talked about RBAC, role-based access control. Who can do what? That's what we define with RBAC. Defines what action that can be performed. Now the first thing which I want you to buy was, hey, RBAC